let me start with the review. Last time we looked at chapter number 6, which is labeled by some scholars as one of the darkest chapters in the Bible, and I told you the reason why they call it so. Chapter number 6, we looked at satisfaction, and we saw how important it was for us to be satisfied. We could have everything in the world, but along with it, we would need 3 essential things. We will need time, we will need opportunity, and we will also need the desire to enjoy. Only if we get these 3 things, time, opportunity, and the desire to enjoy, then only we will get satisfaction. Time and opportunity comes from God. Time and opportunity comes from God. We cannot do anything for that. But for desire, the desire to enjoy, is something that we have to work on. That is what chapter 6 was saying. That for satisfaction you need all these 3, but 2 come from God. But the third one, the desire to enjoy, is something we have to work on. So all the while through chapter 1 to chapter 6, we saw that if you can eat, if you can drink, and if you can enjoy the work of your labor, every time he talks about it, he says that it is a gift from God. Now, the gift portion that comes from God in our ability to be satisfied is also in the time and the opportunity element. The desire to enjoy is something we have to work on, and we will have to let wisdom guide us for this. Now, what did wisdom teach us? According to chapter 6, wisdom will help us realize that more of something or better of something and enough of something will not satisfy. If you get more of something, better of something, or enough of something, it will not satisfy. Wisdom will also remind us that anything we have in our possession, in our hands, is much more valuable than what is not in our hands. It could be an idea or a desire in our mind, but it is not in our hands. What is in our hands is more valuable. So we should make up our minds to enjoy whatever we have in our grasp. Wisdom also tells us that some things are limited by God, are in His control, in His sovereignty. So we will never be able to cross those limits. See, our desires do not see those limits, so our desires will go anywhere. But in our real life, we will have limits. If there are some things that we will not be able to get ever, we should understand it, we should see it, and we should accept it. Wisdom also tells us, we may think that some things are good for us, but it might not be good. Only God knows what is good for us. Therefore, at some point, we will have to decide to trust that God is giving us the best. When you put all these information together, you will be able to work on your desire to enjoy. When we put this information into our thought process, we should be able to find satisfaction when God gives us the good gifts along with life, that is time and opportunities. Chapter 7 is a very long chapter with 29 verses, but there is a lot of stuff inside of it. I think from chapter 7 onwards, the critic takes a turn, a change. Now, we will not be able to take all the 29 verses today because there is too much stuff there. So today I will just take verses 1 to 10. So chapter number 7, verses 1 to 10 is what we are going to focus today. These 10 verses, if you read, they're very peculiar, and if you read it, you can almost make it, or rather, you can almost call it as Solomon's Beatitudes. Just like Matthew chapter 5, 1 to 8, 1 to 9 is Jesus' Beatitude from the Sermon on the Mount. Verses 1 to 10 of chapter 7 of Ecclesiastes is Solomon's Beatitudes. Till chapter 6, the critic was only making a diagnosis of all the things we have and how they add up to vanity. So it was similar to a diagnosis of illness. But in chapter 7, he shifts the gears to suggest the good things in life. So when you read especially verses 1 to 10, you will see the word better, tod in Hebrew, better, written again and again. I didn't count, maybe it's some 6 or 7 times, 8 times it's written there. The word better comes up frequently in this portion, and it comes as a suggestion by the critic. These are prescriptions by the critic, and it will do us well to stick to it. And he has suggested this after trying them, and he is mentioning the results also. So first I will list down 8 major points of the Beatitudes which have the word better in it, or it may not show the word better in it, but the sentence is written in such a way that the word better is there. So I have listed 8 major points. A good name is better than good ointment or a good fragrance or a good perfume. Day of death is better than the day of birth. House of mourning is better than the house of feasting. Sorrow is better than laughter. Rebuke of the wise is better than the song of fools. The end of anything is better than the beginning. Patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. And the 8th one is, today is better than the former days. These are 8 Beatitudes, and we will now look at it one by one. Now, the turn taken by the critic is because so far he listed everything as vanity, and then he talks about satisfaction in chapter number 6. But he wants us to now use our wisdom, which he started using more forcefully in chapter number 6, that wisdom to now guide us out of that thought that everything is vanity, into there are good things in life. There are good things in life, and that wisdom will help us understand what is good thing. Now, what I want you to note is he uses the word better. So that doesn't mean that a good fragrance is not good, or the birthday is not good, or the house of feasting is not good, or laughter is not good. You understand? It doesn't mean that the other is bad and this one is good. It is just saying better. So it is relatively more advantageous. It is relatively better. Wisdom has told him that it is better to do this because there is lesser vanity in this thing. Everything is vanity. But there are some things which are better than the others. So there is a relativeness that you will see in your life, you will find in your life, and you have to grasp it. So both are needed. I mean, we need to go into houses of feasting, but that cannot be the only place you go. If we are given a freedom, that's the only place we will go. We cannot be always in laughter. Given a chance, we always want to be in a state of laughter. We can always avoid rebuke and always have flatterers sing songs for us. But that cannot be the only thing that is happening in your life. You will sometimes also need to face rebuke. So that's the suggestion from the critic. You will have to create a balance. You will need to know how to create that balance. And that's where wisdom comes into play. So before I delve into the first point, I thought I should just tell you this as a starting point. Let's come to verse number 1. He says a good name is better than good ointment. Good ointment doesn't mean the medicine. It means a good fragrance or a good perfume. Now, what's a good name? What is a good name? A good name means a person who has a good character, but also along with that has a good reputation that goes with that character. So a good name means somebody who has a good character and also a good reputation. What is good character? Good character is something that you are, but good reputation is what people think you are. So it is not just who you think you are, it is also about who others think you are. Then only it becomes a good name. If you are just a person with a good character but a bad reputation for some reason, people have misunderstood you or never understood you. So you are a good person with a bad character, you don't have a good name. So character by itself will not give you a good name. You will also need to have a good reputation. That means you will have to start influencing others. You cannot be single bodies, always reclused, staying alone. I don't want to be with people. No, that won't give you a good name. The critic says, and by his experience and wisdom, he tells us that we should have a good name, which means we will have to have a good character and a good reputation. So it is both the substance and the shadow, both. Together, they give you the fullness of a good name. Now, some of you may ask, how can I make a good reputation? How can somebody have a good reputation? A person who wants to have a good reputation should first and foremost be a person of truthfulness. If you are not a truthful man, you will only end up with bad reputation. So that is one of the basic things. You have to be a truthful person, a person of integrity. But along with that truthfulness, he will also need to have a sense of fairness. He will have to treat others equally and himself also equally with others. So there is a sense of justice. And along with that, he should be sincere, he should be faithful, and he should have a good sense. He should be intelligent, a person of understanding. So truthfulness, justice, sincerity, fidelity, that is faithfulness, and a good sense. This is what gives you a good reputation. Now, along with that, if you have also the attribute that you are an industrious man, hard worker, and you also have skills to add to it, and your life is pure and benevolent, that makes it a better name. Not just a good name, it's a better name. So that is how you get a good reputation. Now, how is a good reputation better than a good ointment or a good perfume? What does good reputation do? Or what does rather good name do? A good name creates around the person a feel-good factor. When you are a person of a good character, having a good reputation, then you have a feel-good factor around you, which makes other people to have a goodwill towards you. So they always have good things to say about you. They're kind to you always. They are nice to you. Now, when you continue this good reputation and character consistently, that means you make a good name and you keep your name good for a long time, people will realize that you are real and you are stable. When they see that over a period of time, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, this fellow is maintaining a good name, that means he is having a good character and he is having a good reputation. When they see that, your value increases in their mind, and that increase of value is greater than increase in any asset. It increases rapidly. People sense a good name and they start giving value to it. So just like a good perfume is beneficial for the possessor and also precious when its fragrance diffuses to those around him. Just like that, a good name is also like that. It is beneficial for the one who has a good name, and then out of his good character and reputation, something diffuses so that the good of everyone results. Why it is better than a good fragrance? Because a good fragrance, like perfumes, are short-lived in their influence. So you put a perfume 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours, but then what? But a good name will live on for a much, much longer time. It will leave an impact and influence much longer. Perfumes are costly, but a good name has more value than any perfume. And good names are rarer than perfumes. So, because of these reasons, a good name is better than a good fragrance. Though the influence is very similar, how good fragrance makes the environment better, a good name will also make an environment better. But a good name is always better than 100 perfumes. Also, there is nothing better a man can give to his posterity, that means his children, than a good name. If your children can enjoy your good name, that is your goodwill or your good reputation, that is the greatest asset you can give to them. We know so many good names around us which have lifted up the ideal of manhood or humanity in our country. Gandhi stands as a name. Ambani stand as a name. Tatas stand as a name. Birlas stand as a name. So these are all good names that have lifted the ideal of humanity through our country. But there are names which have done that throughout the whole world. Gandhi is one of them. Nelson Mandela is another. Mother Teresa is another. Whichever field they come from, when they have a good name, it becomes the heritage of the whole world. Now in verse number 1 itself, the critic talks about the day of death being better than the day of birth. And I think it is not coincidence that the good name is mentioned along with the day of death. See, if a man earns a good name, for such a man, the day of his death is better than the day of his birth, because his impact will multiply manifold when he dies. When a person dies, his influence multiplies manifold. A lot of work that men do in their lives are not valued when they are alive, but are celebrated only after that man is gone. You will notice that in several instances. When the person is alive, he is around, nobody values what he does, but once he is gone, his value increases. I will explain why that happens. Similarly, the good name and its influence, rather its fragrance, carries abroad, carries all over after his death. Now, why does a good name become more fragrant after death? This happens because when a person dies, death removes envy in the minds of people for that man, jealousy in the minds of people for that man. Death removes groupisms and sectarianisms that prevail inside communities. Death removes every attempt to defame or spoil the reputation of that person. Death removes the prejudices that people have against him. When a person dies, then people around him no longer feel the need to hold on to envy, jealousy, sectarianism, or attempts to defame him or any prejudices against him. They just drop it. And because these blockages are removed, his work and his name becomes bigger after his death. And it spreads rampantly and it spreads fast, wider. Even those who stood against him when he was alive make way to make the spread faster. Isn't that strange? that men are more compassionate to the dead body than to the living person. That's such an irony we see around us because of the fall of man. For us believers, the day of death is better than the day of birth because it earmarks the end of suffering and grief. So all the grief and suffering we have in this world, all the pain we go through, it ends the day we die, because the day we close our eyes to the world, we open our eyes to an eternal life. For us believers, our final triumph over sin happens when we die, and we become ready to enter into a perfection where there is no more sin. And for us believers, when we close our eyes to this world, to this limited time frame, we begin our eternity. So when we have such glorious things happening at our death, a day of death is always better than the day of birth. Let me take verse number 2, 3 and 4 together, because they seem to be a single chunk. What it essentially says are two things. So I'll group both those things and talk. House of mourning is better than the house of feasting. Sorrow is better than laughter. These three verses have the same theme, so we'll look at it together. Think of someone who is always thinking of partying, entertainment and amusement. The critic says, if you are on such a path, no wonder or no doubt it is giving you happiness, but it will not give you any good. In the earlier chapter, we saw that if we continue in a state of mirth and amusement and partying, it is madness and it will do no good. When he is telling us that something is better than the other, he is saying that we need to have a good mix. We need to have the feasting, but we also need to have the mourning. We need to have the laughter, but we also need to have the sorrow. We need to have a good mix. So we will need to add the other side, which naturally we don't want to. But the critic says, this is better, do it. What happens when you go into a house of mourning? It brings a balance, is what the critic says. It allows reflection, and also the sorrow that we feel as we go through that sadness or that circumstance, or when we sympathize with the grieving people, it only makes us more wise and better. It gives us wisdom. While the other house, the house of partying and mirth, only results in foolishness. Now, how can you say that? Let's think of what happens when you go into a house of mourning. What are the kind of reflections or thoughts that we go through? When you go into a house of mourning, one of the things you think about is about the transitory nature of our life. कि यार आदमी तो इतना ही है, That's one of the first thought that comes. All that the world brings to us is so fickle, so temporary, and can go away like vapor from us. So it wakes up the eyes of our spirit to look beyond what the eyes of our flesh see day in and day out. It makes us think about God and eternity. It makes us want to look forward for a better world. This is one of the thought processes that happen when you go to a house of mourning. A visit to a house of mourning can also awaken some people to a sense of piety and devotion to God. They suddenly become more aware of God. People suddenly realize how much man needs God. And then some of them go to a place where they say that if God is what we ultimately need, why not devote ourselves to Him from now onwards? So a house of mourning can make you more God sensitive. A visit to a house of mourning will also make you tender and compassionate and sympathetic towards others and their pains. Imagine a person who does not visit a house of mourning or a house of sorrow. They're only going to the house of laughing and partying. What happens? Their hearts are hardened. And when people go through pain, they don't understand because they have never undergone the pain. They cannot sympathize. They become hardened people. When you go into a house of mourning, it also incites in you a need for self-discipline. Somehow you think that, I need to get my life in order. I need to correct so many things in life. I need to forgive. I need to be less angry. I need to sort issues in my relationships. I need to be in control of my temperance. I need to be more sober. I cannot lose my level-headedness all the time. There is an urgency for the need of self-discipline. So I said 4 things here, right? I said that when you go into a house of mourning, you suddenly realize how fickle life is. Second is, you become God conscious. Third is, you become tender and compassionate and sympathetic towards other people. Fourth is, you suddenly understand the need for self-discipline. Now, these reflections are wisdom. They only make you wiser. So when you go into a house of mourning, you only end up becoming more wise. Now, there is also another benefit of going into a house of mourning. It allows us to do good for other people. See, when you stand with a person in his pain, in his suffering, in his most difficult times, you may not have the right words. You may not even know what to say to him so that his pain can be less. But at that time, understand this, he doesn't want to listen to your wisdom. At that time, your presence is very, very important. When you stand there with him, in his pain, you're silent, you're just standing there. You don't even know whether you are doing anything to benefit him, but his pain becomes lesser when people stand and share with him. Happiness multiplies when it is shared. Sorrow gets divided when it is shared. So you are able to do good to somebody when you go into a house of mourning. Also, those who have shared the griefs and pains of other people, suppose I have shared the grief and pain of one of my friends, I've stood with him in his toughest times. You know what happens? That friend will start giving you greater access into his life. You will be able to speak into several areas of his life. He will listen to you because he knows that you stood with him. He will look at you as a friend in need, a true friend. And when he sees a true friend, he values his words. And at that point of time, you will be able to speak into his spiritual life also, and also about his eternal welfare. So why is it good to go into a house of mourning? Why is it good to choose sorrow over laughter? I think you got it. But mind you, I want to remind you, I said it is better. I said it is better. So we need a balance. Now let's look at verses 5 and 6. What does verse 5 and 6 say? It says, rebuke of the wise is better than the song of fools. It is better to have wise people go critical on you rather than having fools singing your praises all the time. The wise man's rebuke, if received cordially, you receive it positively, and if you act upon it, it will only do you good. While the flatteries of fools, people who are yes men around you, who will just keep saying, yeah, it's good, and clap their hands all the time and only tell you good things, which tickle and please your mind just like music and songs do. That's all the good it will do. Flatteries will only please you when you are listening to it. But after that, no good. On the other hand, the rebuke of the wise man, it hurts first, but heals in the long run. So if you know of people who you identify as this person, he's always critical, he's always finding fault, he's always finding reasons to poke me, If he is doing it habitually and if he is doing that to intimidate you and put you down, then you don't have to bother about such a person. But if that person is recognized by you as somebody who is wise and he is rebuking you so that you can become better, then you know now what to do. It is better to listen to his rebuke than to Song of Fools. You can always have flatterers around you, but do not write off the man who rebukes. Some people have this habit of, oh, ये कभी कोई अच्छा बोलता नहीं है, इनका बात सुनने का नहीं. No, not that attitude is not wise. Sometimes it's good to have this balance. People who are your critics, who will pull you down. You don't always have to people who always pep you up. There should be people who pull you down also. Now he adds an interesting example to explain this concept in verse number 6. He says that like the crackling of thorns under a pot is the laughter of the fools, like the crackling of thorns under a pot. Thorns, when they're used to lit a fire under a pot, if you set it on fire, they make a lot of crackling noises, tuck, 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 under the pot. But when they burn away fast and they get over. Just like the laughter of fools. There is no melody, only noise, and that gets over. So the laughter of fools is equated as just noise. It will not benefit you. Flatteries sound good when you are getting it firsthand, but look out more for the rebuke of the wise man. Verse number 7 is like a caveat, a warning. It is to this wise men. Sometimes wise men can start feeling quite important about themselves. And there is a warning for wise men. When a wise man is in a place of power and authority, when he has people under him and he can exercise this power and authority, he should be very careful, because if he abuses his power to oppress those under him, if he abuses power to do some kind of an extortion, without his knowing, his wisdom will give way to foolishness. He may consider himself a wise man, but his oppression or extortion has already opened the doors of foolishness. It's just like wine makes you slip away into foolishness. Oppressing somebody or extorting or taking some benefit because they are under you or powerless is also foolishness. He also adds that if he takes bribes or favors or gifts from those under him, he is paving the way for destruction of his understanding. You can also look at it in another way. If the wise man observes the oppression of the poor by wicked, by some other people, by the corrupted people, and when he sees that, he calls into question God's wisdom and dispensation, he becomes a fool, because he's questioning God's abilities. Similarly, he notices bribery in the high places and he gets disturbed by it. Then he gets carried away into a place of lack of proper understanding. So he should be very careful. The wise man, he can rebuke anybody, but he should make sure that he doesn't oppress people and he doesn't take any favors from people around him. And if he sees such things happening, he should not fret and murmur. He should be very careful. Verse number 8 and 9 says, the end of a thing is better than the beginning. Now, this is something we commonly understand, because a fruit is always better than the flower. Reaping is always better than sowing. Victory in a battle is better than the march into the battle. Reward is always better than service. Home is always better than the journey towards home. So we know that the end is better than the beginning. However, if you are engaged in wickedness, in things that are not good in the sight of God, the converse will become true. The beginning may be good, but the end may be bitter and sad. Another thing we can learn from this is that we forget often about the journey between the beginning and the end. When the critic says that the end is better than the beginning, he is saying that you should not forget that to make the end better, there needs to be hard effort. There needs to be constant progress and therefore constant evaluation that has to happen in between, so that a seed becomes harvest ready to be reaped. So easy to say that reaping is better than sowing, but for reaching from sowing to reaping, there are several stages. There are several things that need to be done. So you should not forget about the journey. Sometimes we can grasp the vision. You can say, Pastor, I see this thing, what I want to become. I can see in my mind that I am a singer, I am a preacher, I am a musician, I am this, I am that. Seeing that thing is one thing. Being possessive and obsessed about it is also one thing. But doing that slow, consistent work that takes you from here to there is where all the trouble is. That's where all the pain and suffering is. That's where life is. He says, let's not forget that the end may be better than the beginning, but there is a lot of hard work that goes along. There is a lot of risk and cost that needs to be paid so that the march into the battle leads to a victory in the battle. So easy to say that victory is better. But have you considered the risk that you have to take, the cost that you have to pay? So much you have to lose. We say that the reward is better than the service, but so many hours of consistent, skillful labor has to be put in. We can say that yes, reaching home is better than the journey, but hours and hours of quietly sitting in a vehicle or at the airport or in a train needs to happen, and that time needs to be spent very patiently. So the end is better than the beginning. Don't just think about the beginning and the end. There is a journey that's in between, and there is a price to be paid. So now we were talking about the journey between the beginning and the end. And that's why in that verse, verse number 9, I think it is written that a patient in spirit, person with a patience in spirit is better than he who is proud in the spirit. Because of the journey in between, I think this verse is added there. We like big events, big things to happen. But we forget that most of the things are done in the small, slow, patient, little events which do not create a lot of fanfare or sound and noise. Life actually changes dramatically in its small, tiny steps. The flowers are not freshened by water spouts, they are freshened by the dew in the morning. The water spout will come, blow up everything, make a lot of noise, make every place wet, but it will not make the flower fresh. What makes the flower fresh is the morning dew. A waterfall will not make a land fertile. In fact, waterfall will remove the land and only rocks will remain. It is the river that flows silently and quietly that makes the land fertile. Lightnings do not make life possible on the earth. Lightnings, in fact, kill people. It is the silent, ineffective, unseen, invisible sunbeams, rays of the sun, that make life possible on the earth. Why I gave you these examples is to make you understand that everything need not be very dramatic. Things can happen very slowly, smoothly. Nobody may even notice. But you may be making a progress from your beginning towards your end, and an end that is more glorious I know we like the waterfalls. I know we like the lightnings. We want our life to be happening. But it not be like that. It will not be like that. There will be small things happening day on day. And you will be progressing towards your end. So we need to be patient when we go through time. These little things can make us impatient. We need to be patient. We need to be patient in the Spirit. Patience does a perfect work, says the New Testament. Those who are impatient are proud people. And they usually have a sense of entitlement. They stand in a queue and they get impatient. Why? Because they feel that, no, I will not wait. I have a lot of other works to do, and why should I wait? I should get this. I should get this faster than the rest of the people. Why are they impatient? Because they are proud and they feel that they deserve it. And they deserve it without any delay. Satan has no patience. He is impatient. He wants to destroy people around him. And he also is the epitome of pride. He who lacks patience is also proud, and that is why in his haste, in his hurry, he tends to become angry. And an impatient man's haste only makes his anger overflow as foolishness. So there is a caveat added there for the impatient man. An impatient man will always show forth his impatience by words that he speaks, by the emotions he expresses. Usually that's anger. And in his impatience, when the anger comes out, he only appears like a fool to those around him. Now there is the last point on my list, that today or the present day is better than the former days. Actually, in verse number 10, you will not see that. You will only see an argument that many people think that the former days are better. The old days were good. We often talk about it. Okay, those days, even when our fathers meet, or even when I meet now with my friends, often talk, those days were golden days. Oh, those days when I was in school. Oh, those days when I was in college. When I talk about my business, I say, oh, those days when, my father did his business. Golden period of business in India. Because trade flourished, people made a lot of money, land was worth just hundreds. Yeah, riches were easily available, and people lived with great ease and had plenty. That's the usual observation. Now, even as Christians, when we look back at our own lives, we often tend to make this, the former days were better than today. We always tend to say, oh, that experience when I got saved, oh my God, it was so wonderful. There was a glory on my face, a beam in my eyes. There was a joy always flashing from my lips. We always talk about the innocence of those days, the joy and the number of hours we prayed and the number of hours we spent in devotions, the number of fastings we took and the friends we met and the fellowships we had and the meetings we attended and the things we talked about. But by saying that the former days are better than today, are you not condemning yourself? Because if that joy has gone, who has allowed it? If that brightness or glory from your face has vanished, who has allowed it? If those prayer hours have decreased, those time you spend in devotions have come to naught, who is responsible? So by saying that the olden days were better days, now I am in a more pathetic shape, you are only condemning yourselves. So what you need to do is, you need to revisit the kind of sacrifices you make in your life. You need to revisit the obediences in your life. You need to revisit the kind of confidence you have. You need to look at the lapses in these areas that have led to your backsliding and make you wonder why these days are not as good as the olden days. We also have such thoughts when we evaluate our growth, our progress. But we need to understand that in our initial days, the rate of growth will always be very high because we have moved away from darkness into light. So that shift is very stark. To make a 1 rupee into a 2 rupee is very easy, and make a 1 rupee into a 10 rupee is also easy. A 1 rupee into 10 rupees, oh my God, I had a 10 times increase. Even 10 can become 100. Then also you continue to show the same amount of growth. But then 100 to become 1000 and 1000 to become 10,000. You can't expect the same kind of growth all through your life. So the initial periods of your life will have a rapid growth because you are coming from zero. So you need to reach a certain place. So you will see a rapid growth. But then you need to understand that in the long haul, things will slow down. So you did not get into that mood of condemnation. That's why he says that you have come to this conclusion because you have not evaluated things properly. If you keep doing this, I'm sure God will interpret it as a murmuring against His providence. The critic says that such an observation is owing to your ignorance. Former times were not better than now. There always were bad men. There always were bad things that were done. Things were always as bad as they are now. And if they are worse now, it's only because men have become worse. But when we say that men have become worse, Jamana bahut badal gaya, bigad gaya, we say that it's become a wicked generation, evil generation. You cannot leave yourself out. You are also a part of that generation. If men have fallen, you have also fallen along with those men. You can't put your fingers out at the world and leave yourself out. You need to also introspect and think how you have contributed in a way that former days look better than your today. So that brings me to the conclusion of part A of chapter number 7. So we looked at 8 major aspects, which I call as Solomon's Beatitudes. A good name is better than good fragrance. Day of death better than the day of birth. House of mourning better than the house of feasting. Sorrow better than laughter. Rebuke of the wise better than the song of fools. End of something better than the beginning. Patient in the spirit better than the proud in the spirit. And today being better than the former days. I hope these were very good, clear insights into our lives. And you will consider this when you look at your lives, when you take your decisions. Again, I remind you, there are 16 things mentioned here. Only 8 of them are better than the other 8. Doesn't mean all the remaining 8 are useless. All 16 things might be needed at some point of time. But one is better than the other. May God give you the wisdom to discern it. May God give you the wisdom to deal rightly with your lives. God bless you.